His fist moved in slow motion, or maybe that's just how memory works when your son-in-law decides you're no longer family. The porch boards creaked under his boots. The same boards my wife Maggie and I had replaced the summer before cancer took her voice, but not her dignity. "This isn't your house anymore, old man," Derek said, and I tasted copper before I felt the pain. 11 years I'd stayed away, sending checks, making calls nobody answered, honoring my daughter's request for space, and this was my welcome home. Knuckles, beer breath, and the sickening realization that the business Maggie died protecting was already sold. What he didn't know, what none of them knew, was that I still had the original deed. And lawyers, unlike families, don't forget who signs their checks. The impact snapped my head sideways. I felt my jaw pop, heard Claire gasp from somewhere behind Derek's broad shoulders, but I didn't fall. Maggie used to say I had a low center of gravity, both physically and emotionally. "You're the kind of man who bends, but never breaks." Tom, she'd told me once, her fingers tracing the scar above my left eyebrow from a construction accident years before. "That's why I married you." I thought about that as blood pooled in my mouth. About bending, about breaking, about which one I was doing now. Derek stood there, chest heaving, knuckles still curled, waiting for me to react, to swing back, to give him an excuse to finish what he'd started. Instead, I straightened slowly, touched my split lip with 2 fingers, and examined the red smear like it was something clinical. Interesting. Evidence. "You done?" I asked quietly. His eyes narrowed. Behind him, Claire had one hand pressed to her mouth, the other gripping the doorframe so hard her knuckles matched the white paint. She looked thinner than I remembered. Older. The girl who used to climb onto my shoulders to reach the top kitchen cabinets was gone, replaced by this hollow-eyed woman who watched her husband assault her father and said nothing. "I told you not to come," she whispered. "I know. Then why?" "Because someone has to." I shifted my gaze back to Derek. "You planning to hit me again, or can we talk like adults?" Derek's jaw worked. I could see him calculating, weighing his options. He was used to intimidation working, used to people backing down when he puffed up. But I'd spent 30 years in construction, managing crews of men who thought yelling was the same as leadership. Derek Sullivan, with his luxury SUV and his developer vanity plates and his $200 haircut, didn't scare me. What scared me was the look in my daughter's eyes. Empty. Complicit. "There's nothing to talk about," Derek said finally. "The business is sold. Papers are signed. You're too late." I nodded slowly. "Papers signed by who?" "By Claire. She's the owner." "Is she?" I let the question hang there, watched his certainty waver, just a fraction. "Did you actually read those papers, Derek? Or did you just assume?" Something flickered across his face. Doubt, anger, fear, maybe, buried deep beneath the bravado. I picked up my overnight bag from where I'd dropped it when his fist connected. The cabbie was still waiting at the curb, engine idling, probably wondering if he should call the police. I gave him a small wave, "Everything's fine," and turned back to the house. "I'll be at the Comfort Inn on Route 42, I said. "When you're ready to discuss this properly, you know where to find me." "Don't bother coming back," Derek called after me. I paused at the bottom of the porch steps. I wasn't asking permission. If you've ever been pushed out of something you built with your own hands, something you sacrificed for, something that carried your family's name, tell me, did you walk away, or did you fight back? Drop a comment. I read every single one, because your stories matter just as much as mine. The motel room smelled like industrial cleaner and old coffee. I sat on the edge of the bed, holding a bag of ice against my jaw, and let myself remember what I'd spent 11 years trying to forget. Maggie died on a Tuesday. Not the diagnosis that came 2 years earlier, in a doctor's office that smelled like antiseptic and crushed dreams. Stage 4 pancreatic cancer, the oncologist said. And those 3 words rewrote our entire lives in a single afternoon. But the actual dying, the final breath, the moment her hand went slack in mine, that happened on a Tuesday, at 4:17 inches the morning, while rain hammered the hospice windows. Claire was 22 then. Fresh out of college, Engaged to Derek Sullivan, a local developer's son who wore Italian shoes to backyard barbecues and talked about market opportunities the way other people talked about the weather. I didn't like him. Maggie didn't either, though she was kinder about it. "He makes Claire happy," she'd said one night, her voice already thin from the morphine. "That's what matters." "Does he?" I'd asked. She'd squeezed my hand. "He makes her feel safe. That's close enough." I didn't understand then. I do now. Claire wasn't looking for love, she was looking for stability. Something solid to cling to while her mother dissolved into pain and prescriptions. Derek offered that. Structure. Certainty. A future that didn't include watching someone you love disappear by degrees. After the funeral, things fell apart fast. Claire wanted to sell everything, the house, the business, all of it. "Start fresh," she kept saying, like grief was something you could outrun if you just moved fast enough. I wanted to preserve what Maggie had built. Mercer Heritage Salvage wasn't just a business, it was 23 years of her vision, her relationships, her refusal to let beautiful things be destroyed just because they were old. We fought. God, we fought about everything. Who got Mom's recipe box? Whether to cremate or bury? Which photos to use in the memorial slideshow? Small, stupid things that felt enormous because we were both drowning and neither of us knew how to ask for help. The final fight happened 3 months after the funeral, in the parking lot of the salvage warehouse. Claire had brought Derek. I'd brought Vincent Rhodes, Maggie's lawyer and one of my oldest friends. The conversation should have been simple. Review the business structure, confirm ownership, plan next steps. Instead, it became a war. "Dad, you need to let this go," Claire had said, her voice sharp, brittle. "Mom's gone. Keeping this place open isn't going to bring her back." "I'm not trying to bring her back. I'm trying to honor her." "By what? Playing businessman? You're a contractor, Dad. You don't know anything about running a salvage operation." That stung. Mostly because she was right. I built things, houses, decks, commercial renovations. Maggie had been the visionary, the one who could look at a condemned Victorian and see the ornamental crown molding worth saving, the stained glass windows that belonged in a museum. But I'd learned, spent weekends helping her catalog inventory, negotiating with demolition crews, delivering reclaimed materials to designers and architects who appreciated craftsmanship. I knew enough. More than Derek did, certainly. "Your mother left the business to both of us," I'd said. "Partnership. 50-50. We make decisions together. Then I'm deciding to sell. You can't. Not without my consent." That's when Derek stepped in, all smiles and reason. "Tom, let's be practical. Claire's grieving. You're grieving. This business is just going to become a source of conflict. Why not cash out now, while the market's good? I've already got a buyer lined up." "You, what?" "A commercial developer who's interested in the property. Not the inventory, just the land. We could net close to $500,000 after taxes. Split it down the middle. Everyone walks away clean." I'd looked at Claire then, really looked at her. "Is that what you want? To bulldoze everything your mother built so some developer can put up condos?" She'd flinched. "It's not like that." "Then what's it like?" Silence. The kind that opens up craters between people. Finally, she'd said, "I can't do this anymore, Dad. I can't walk into that warehouse and smell her perfume on old furniture. I can't keep pretending that saving antique doorknobs is going to fill the hole she left. I need to move on." "And I don't?" "You won't." Her eyes were wet, angry. "You're going to stay here and turn into some tragic widower who haunts his dead wife's business until you're too old to remember why." "I'm not watching that. I can't." 3 weeks later, I packed everything I owned into a U-Haul and drove to Phoenix. Left her the house. Left her the responsibility. Sent checks every month to cover the business expenses, insurance, utilities, property taxes. Told myself I was being the bigger person, giving her space to heal. What I was really doing was running. The ice bag had gone warm in my hand. I dropped it in the sink, splashed cold water on my face, and stared at my reflection. The bruise was already forming, a dark bloom spreading from my cheekbone to my jaw. 57 years old, and I looked every day of it. My phone buzzed. A text from Vincent Rhodes. Got your message. Free tomorrow at 9 a.m. Bring everything. I typed back, I will. Then I opened my suitcase and pulled out the fireproof document case I'd carried from Arizona. Inside were the papers Derek didn't know existed, the ones Maggie had made me promise to keep safe. No matter what happens, she'd said 3 days before she died, don't let them erase what we built. I hadn't understood what she meant, not until now. The email had arrived 6 days earlier, on a Thursday afternoon, while I was reviewing blueprints for a small medical clinic renovation in Scottsdale. My phone dinged, and Claire's name appeared on the screen. I almost didn't open it. Our communication had dwindled to birthday texts and awkward holiday phone calls where we both pretended everything was fine. An unsolicited email meant something had gone wrong. I clicked it open. Subject: Mercer Heritage Salvage. Final notice. Dad, I'm writing to inform you that Derek and I have accepted an offer to sell the business. The buyer is Sullivan Development Group, Derek's family company, and they're purchasing the property, inventory, and all associated assets for $425,000. Your share comes to $425,000. Your share comes to $425,000. Your share comes to $212,500. The sale closes November 30th. I need you to sign the attached transfer documents and return them by November 15th. Our lawyer has already reviewed everything. This is a fair offer, well above market value for a struggling business. I know you're going to be upset, but please try to understand. The salvage operation has been losing money for 3 years. I've been covering the shortfall out of my own pocket. Derek's been patient, but we have our own financial goals. We want to start a family. We need this capital. Please don't make this harder than it needs to be. Sign the papers, take the money, move on. Claire, I'd read it 5 times before the fury set in. Not hot anger, cold. The kind that clarifies instead of clouds. The attachment was a PDF labeled Asset Transfer Agreement, Mercer Heritage. 43 pages of legal language that basically said I was signing away every right to the business Maggie and I had built. Together. There was a signature line for Claire, already signed, a signature line for me, blank, and a notary seal, waiting to make it official. I'd opened my laptop, pulled up the business bank statements I still had access to. Maggie had made sure my name stayed on the accounts, even after I moved, and started digging. What I found made my stomach turn. The business wasn't losing money. Not even close. In fact, revenue had increased 18% over the past 2 years. A local interior designer had been buying regularly. 3 different historical societies had contracted for period-specific materials. The online store Claire had set up was generating consistent sales, but the expenses told a different story. Someone had been pulling money out. Lots of it. $30,000 here, $45,000 there. Always labeled as operational costs, or inventory acquisition, or facility maintenance. Except I knew what facility maintenance actually cost. The warehouse was a simple pole barn on 3 acres. Property taxes were $4,000 a year. Insurance was another $6,000. Utilities maybe ran $3,000 annually, even in winter. There was no legitimate reason for the business to be hemorrhaging cash. I'd called Vincent immediately. Tom? His voice had been warm, familiar. Vincent Rhodes had been Maggie's estate lawyer. But he'd also been the guy who showed up at our house every Super Bowl Sunday with a case of beer and terrible jokes. He'd cried at her funeral. Helped me pack the U-Haul when I left Ohio. We'd kept in touch sporadically over the years, birthday cards, occasional phone calls, but hearing his voice felt like coming home. I need you to look at something, I'd said. Claire's trying to sell the business. She can't. Not without your consent. You're 50% owner. She seems to think she can. I'd emailed him the transfer documents, the bank statements, everything. He'd gone quiet for a long time, and I could hear him clicking through pages, his breath getting shorter. Tom, he'd said finally, this is fraud. What? These withdrawal authorizations, they're signed with your name, digital signatures, but they're supposed to represent your approval for major expenditures. Did you authorize any of these? No, I haven't touched the business accounts in years. Then someone's been forging your consent. And if I had to guess, he'd trailed off. Derek. Vincent had explained it then, how the scam probably worked. Derek gains access to the business accounts through Claire, starts pulling money out for legitimate expenses, creates a paper trail that makes it look like the business is failing. When the financial pressure gets bad enough, he swoops in with his family's development company, offers to help by buying the property at a discount. Claire thinks she's making a smart business decision. Derek gets the land for a fraction of what it's worth, probably already has plans to flip it or develop it into luxury condos. And I'm 3 states away, too grief-stricken and guilty to pay attention. What can we do? I'd asked. You need to come back here. In person. Bring every document Maggie left you. Original deeds, partnership agreements, everything. If we can prove Derek's been embezzling and forging signatures, we can freeze the sale and potentially file criminal charges. What about Claire? Vincent had hesitated. That depends on whether she knows what Derek's been doing. If she's complicit, this gets complicated. If she's being manipulated, he'd sighed. Either way, you need to move fast. Once that sale closes, getting the property back becomes exponentially harder. I'd booked the flight that night, spent the next 5 days organizing documents, scanning receipts, building a case. The bruise on my jaw was still fresh, but it didn't matter. Derek wanted a war? He'd get one. Vincent Rhodes arrived at the Comfort Inn at exactly 9 o'clock the next morning, carrying a leather briefcase that looked older than both of us combined. He took one look at my face and winced. Jesus, Tom, he really did a number on you. I've had worse. I gestured to the small table by the window, where I'd spread out every document from Maggie's fireproof case. Thanks for coming. Vincent set down his briefcase and pulled me into a brief, firm hug. I'm sorry it took this long. I should have been paying closer attention. You didn't know. Neither did I. He pulled out a chair and sat down, surveying the paperwork. His hair had gone completely silver since I'd last seen him, and new lines creased his forehead. But his eyes were the same, sharp, analytical, missing nothing. He picked up the original deed to the salvage property, examined it under the lamplight. Maggie was meticulous, he murmured. Everything notarized, witnessed, dated. She knew exactly what she was doing. She always did. He set the deed down and pulled out a yellow legal pad. Walk me through what happened yesterday. Every detail. I told him about the letter from Claire, the flight, the confrontation, Derek's punch, Claire's silence, the threat to stay away. Vincent took notes, his pen scratching steadily across the paper. When I finished, he looked up. Did anyone else witness the assault? The cab driver, maybe. He was parked at the curb. We'll need his information. A police report would be helpful, too. I shook my head. I'm not pressing charges. Tom, if I press charges against Derek, it makes this look personal, like I'm just a bitter father-in-law with a grudge. I want this to be about the business, the fraud, the forged documents. Keep it clean. Vincent frowned but nodded slowly. All right, then let's focus on the financial evidence. He pulled out his own laptop, opened a spreadsheet. I've been tracking the business accounts since you called. In the past 3 years, Derek has withdrawn approximately $387,000 using forged authorizations with your digital signature. The number hit me like a physical blow. $387,000. And that's just what I can confirm. There might be more buried in cash transactions or payments to shell companies. How is Claire not seeing this? Because he's smart about it. Most of the withdrawals are under $50,000, just below the threshold that triggers automatic bank reviews, and he's spacing them out, one every 2 or 3 months. To someone not looking carefully, it just looks like normal operating expenses for a business this size. I stared at the spreadsheet, watching the numbers blur together. What about the sale to Sullivan Development? That's where it gets interesting. Vincent pulled up another document. The purchase agreement values the property at $425,000, but I pulled recent comparable sales in the area. Land like yours, with commercial zoning and highway access, conservative estimate sit at $1.2 million. Probably closer to $1.5 if you factor in the existing structures and inventory. He's stealing $1 million. At minimum. I stood up, walked to the window. Outside, the parking lot was nearly empty. A few sedans. A family loading luggage into a minivan. Normal people doing normal things, unaware that someone's entire legacy was being dismantled 3 floors above them. Can we stop the sale? I asked. Yes. I'll file an emergency injunction first thing Monday morning. That'll freeze all transactions related to the business pending investigation. But Tom? Vincent's voice softened. You need to prepare yourself. When we do this, it's going to get ugly. Derek's not going to take this lying down. And Claire, I know. Do you? Because once we file, there's no going back. Your daughter is going to have to choose between believing you or believing her husband. And given what happened yesterday, she's already chosen. The words tasted like ash. I just need to make sure she's choosing based on truth, not lies. Vincent was quiet for a moment. Then he closed his laptop and stood. All right, let's burn this bastard down. Have you ever had to fight someone you loved to save them from themselves? Sometimes the people closest to us can't see they're being used until it's too late. If you've been there, share your story below. And if this resonates with you, hit that subscribe button, because this is only the beginning. That afternoon, I drove out to the salvage warehouse alone. Vincent had advised against it. Let me handle the reconnaissance, he'd said, but I needed to see it with my own eyes. Needed to understand what Derek had done to the place Maggie loved. The property sat on the eastern edge of town, where industrial met rural. 3 acres of gravel and grass, anchored by a 40-by-60 pole barn with corrugated metal siding. The sign out front had been changed. Where it used to read Mercer Heritage Salvage, Architectural Antiques, and Reclaimed Materials in Maggie's elegant script, now it just said, Sullivan Property Holdings, no trespassing. I parked on the shoulder of the access road and sat there for a minute, engine off, just looking. The dogwood tree Maggie had planted by the entrance was gone, cut down, the stump ground flat. She'd loved that tree. Said it reminded her of the one her grandmother had in Kentucky, the one she'd climbed as a girl. Derek had erased it like it was nothing. I got out, walked the fence line. The main gate was locked with a heavy chain and padlock, but I knew there was a gap in the fence behind the barn where the mesh had pulled away from the posts. Maggie and I had meant to fix it for years, but it had always been low priority. Now, I was grateful for our procrastination. I squeezed through, careful not to snag my jacket, and approached the barn from the back. The large loading doors were closed, but one of the personnel doors was slightly ajar. I pushed it open slowly. The smell hit me first. Not Maggie's perfume like Claire had claimed, but something worse. Mildew, rot, neglect. The barn was supposed to be climate-controlled, kept at a steady 65 degrees year-round to preserve the wood and prevent warping. Someone had turned off the HVAC. I stepped inside, letting my eyes adjust to the dim light. The main floor was mostly empty. The shelving units that used to hold hundreds of architectural pieces, corbels, mantels, stair balusters, window frames, were gone. Just concrete floor and dust. In the far corner, I could see a few scattered items. A pile of old doors, some broken stained glass, scrap lumber. Everything valuable had been sold off. I walked deeper into the space, my footsteps echoing. The office door at the back was open. I went in. Maggie's desk was still there, but covered in fast food wrappers and empty beer cans. The filing cabinets had been pried open, drawers hanging crooked, papers everywhere. I knelt down, started sifting through them. Invoices, purchase orders, contracts with demolition companies. Most of it was routine, but then I found something that made my blood run cold. A contract between Mercer Heritage Salvage and Sullivan Development Group, dated 8 months ago. It authorized Sullivan Development to assess, inventory, and liquidate all non-essential assets of Mercer Heritage Salvage in preparation for potential sale or restructuring. The signature line for the business owner was signed, but not by Claire, by me, or rather, by someone pretending to be me. The signature was close. Derek had probably practiced, but not quite right. The T in Thomas was too loopy. The M in Mercer didn't have the sharp downstroke I always used. I photographed it with my phone, hands shaking. This was it. Proof of forgery. Proof that Derek had been systematically stripping the business while pretending to have my authorization. I kept searching. Found more contracts. More forged signatures. A lease agreement that transferred the warehouse property to Sullivan Holdings for $1 and other valuable consideration. An inventory list showing that over $200,000 worth of materials had been sold at auction, except there was no auction, just a bulk sale to Sullivan Development at pennies on the dollar. Derek had been cannibalizing the business for parts. I was so focused on the documents that I almost didn't hear the vehicle pull up outside, almost didn't hear the car door slam, almost didn't hear the footsteps crunching across gravel. But I did hear Derek's voice, loud and angry, talking to someone on his phone. I don't care what the old man says. The deal closes in 2 weeks. Just keep Claire calm until then. Once the money's in the account, he can file all the lawsuits he wants. We'll be in the Caymans before he finds a judge who gives a damn. I froze. Phone still in my hand, surrounded by evidence. The footsteps were getting closer. I looked around the office. One door, the one I'd come through, which led directly to the main floor where Derek was about to enter. No windows. No back exit. The door handle started to turn. I did the only thing I could do. I stepped behind the filing cabinet, pressed myself flat against the wall, and held my breath. Derek walked into the office, still talking on his phone. Look, Vincent Rhodes is a washed-up estate lawyer who hasn't seen the inside of a real courtroom in a decade. If he tries anything, we'll bury him in motions until he runs out of money. Tom's broke. Claire's compliant. This is over. He was less than 6 feet away from me. If he turned his head, he'd see me standing there like an idiot, trapped in my dead wife's office while her business was being dismantled around me. But he didn't turn. He walked to the desk, started gathering papers, shoving them into a cardboard box. No, I already cleared out the valuable inventory, he continued. Sold it to a dealer in Columbus. He paid cash, no questions asked. The remaining junk will get hauled to the dump before the sale finalizes. I'm not leaving anything behind that the old man can use against. A voice from outside cut him off. Female. Young. Angry. Derek, we need to talk. Now. Derek's face went tight. I'll call you back, he muttered, ending his call. He dropped the box on the desk and walked out, leaving the office door open. I stayed frozen, listening. What are you doing here, Hannah? Derek's voice had shifted, less aggressive, more condescending. What am I doing here? What are you doing here? You told me the salvage business was being shut down because it was bankrupt. You told me Claire wanted to sell because there was nothing left worth saving. That's true. Then why did I just see a manifest showing you sold $60,000 worth of reclaimed heart pine to a dealer in Columbus last month? That lumber was supposed to go to the Riverside Hotel restoration. I had a contract. There was a pause. I risked leaning forward slightly, peering through the crack between the filing cabinet and the wall. I could see Derek's back, and beyond him, a young woman in her late 20s, dark hair pulled into a ponytail, work boots, carpenter jeans. She was holding a tablet, her face flushed with anger. Hannah, you need to calm down. Don't tell me to calm down. I've been working with Maggie's inventory for 4 years. I know what was in this warehouse, and I know what it's worth. You've been liquidating assets and pocketing the money. That's a serious accusation. It's a true accusation, and I've got the receipts to prove it. She jabbed her tablet at him. I keep copies of every purchase order, every delivery manifest. I've been documenting everything since you took over management last year, because something felt wrong, and now I know why. Derek's shoulders tensed. You're upset, I understand. But where's Tom? What? Tom Mercer, Claire's dad, the actual co-owner of this business. Does he know you're selling off his inventory? Does he know you're planning to demolish this warehouse and put up condos? Tom abandoned this business years ago. He has no say. He has 50% ownership. I've seen the partnership agreement. Maggie showed it to me before she died. Hannah's voice softened slightly. She made me promise that if anything ever happened to her, I'd look out for Tom. She said he was too trusting, that he'd need someone to watch his back. My throat tightened. Maggie had planned for this. Even dying, even knowing she wouldn't be here to protect what we'd built, she'd put safeguards in place. Hannah, Derek said slowly, you're making a mistake. No, you did. She turned and walked toward her truck, parked near the gate. Derek started after her, but stopped when she called back over her shoulder. I'm calling Tom. If you try to stop me, I'm calling the police too. Derek stood there, fists clenched, watching her drive away. And I stood in the shadows, realizing I'd just found the ally I didn't know I had. I waited until Derek left, another 20 minutes of watching him angrily shove papers into boxes and make hushed phone calls, before I slipped out of the office and back through the fence gap. My phone buzzed as I reached my rental car. Unknown number, local area code. I answered. Hello? Mr. Mercer? This is Hannah Chen. I worked with your wife. I sat down hard in the driver's seat. Hannah. Yes, Maggie mentioned you. I'm so sorry I never reached out after she passed. I wanted to, but Claire said you'd moved away and needed space. Her voice was tight, stressed. I just had a confrontation with Derek at the warehouse. He's been systematically looting the business. I know. I was there. Silence. Then, you were hiding behind a filing cabinet while you read him the riot act. Thank you, by the way. A surprised laugh. God, this is insane. Are you okay? Claire told me Derek had asked you to leave, but he did more than ask. I touched my bruised jaw. But I'm fine. Can we meet? I need to know everything you know. We agreed to meet at a coffee shop on the other side of town, away from anywhere Claire or Derek might see us. 20 minutes later, I was sitting across from Hannah Chen, watching her scroll through her tablet with the focused intensity of someone who'd been preparing for this moment. I started working for Maggie 4 years ago, she said. I was fresh out of a carpentry apprenticeship, trying to figure out how to make a living doing restoration work. She took a chance on me, taught me how to identify quality materials, how to negotiate with demolition crews, how to see potential in things other people throw away. She was good at that, I said quietly. The best. Hannah pulled up a spreadsheet. When she got sick, she asked me to help manage inventory, keep track of purchases and sales, maintain the database, handle client relationships. After she died, Claire kept me on, said she needed someone who knew the business. And for a while, everything seemed fine. When did that change? About 18 months ago, Derek started showing up more, asking questions about inventory values, which pieces were most profitable. He said he was trying to help Claire make smart business decisions. I didn't think much of it at first. She paused. Then items started disappearing. What kind of items? High-value pieces, antique mantles, leaded glass windows, a complete set of Victorian-era pocket doors that were worth at least 20 grand. I'd document them in the system, and a week later they'd be gone. No sale record, no delivery receipt, just gone. She showed me her spreadsheet, hundreds of items, meticulously cataloged, with notes about their disappearance. The total value was staggering, close to $500,000. I confronted Claire about it 3 months ago, Hannah said. She seemed genuinely surprised, said she'd talked to Derek. 2 days later, he called me into the office and told me I was being paranoid, that I'd probably just lost track of things, that grief makes people see problems that aren't there. Gaslighting, I said. Exactly. But I'm not crazy, and I'm not paranoid. So I started keeping a second set of records. Everything that came in, everything that went out. Photographed every major piece before it was stored. Created an independent backup that Derek couldn't access. Can I see those records? She slid the tablet across the table. I was hoping you'd ask. I spent the next hour going through Hannah's documentation. Every photo, every receipt, every transaction that showed Derek systematically stripping the business while Claire remained oblivious or complicit. When I finally looked up, Hannah was watching me carefully. What are you going to do? She asked. I pulled out my phone and called Vincent. "We file tomorrow," I said when he answered. "I've got everything we need." The emergency injunction was filed Monday morning at 8:47 a.m. By 10:15, Derek knew about it. I was in Vincent's office when his secretary buzzed in. "Mr. Rhodes, there's a Derek Sullivan here. He's agitated. Says he needs to speak with you immediately." Vincent and I exchanged glances. "Send him in," Vincent said calmly. Derek burst through the door like a storm front, his face red, a vein pulsing in his temple. He saw me sitting in the corner and his eyes went flat, cold. "You son of a bitch." "Mr. Sullivan," Vincent said, standing. "If you're here to discuss the injunction, I'm happy to. You ambushed me, filed a fraudulent motion full of lies and conspiracy theories to sabotage a legitimate business transaction. There's nothing fraudulent about evidence," I said quietly. "You forged my signature on withdrawal authorizations. You liquidated inventory without proper authorization. You've been embezzling from a business you don't own." "I don't own it?" Derek laughed, sharp and bitter. "Where the hell have you been for the past 11 years, Tom? Who do you think kept that business afloat while you were hiding in Arizona, sending guilt checks and pretending you still mattered? The business was never failing. You made it look that way by stealing from it." Derek's jaw worked. I could see him calculating, trying to figure out what we knew, what we could prove. Finally, he turned to Vincent. "How much does he want?" "Excuse me?" "To drop this, to go away quietly. Everyone's got a price." "What's his?" Vincent's expression didn't change. "Mr. Mercer isn't interested in money. He's interested in justice." "Justice." Derek spat the word like it tasted rotten. "You want to talk about justice? Let's talk about abandonment. Let's talk about a father who walked away from his daughter when she needed him most. Who left her to manage a business she never wanted, to clean up his mess, to carry all the responsibility while he played the victim." The words hit harder than his fist had, because there was truth in them, jagged, ugly truth I'd been avoiding for 11 years. "You're right," I said. "I left. I ran. And I've regretted it every day since." Derek blinked, surprised. "But that doesn't give you the right to steal what my wife built. It doesn't give you the right to manipulate my daughter. And it sure as hell doesn't give you the right to forge my signature and commit fraud." Derek's hands curled into fists. For a second, I thought he might swing again, but Vincent stepped between us, his voice sharp. "Mr. Sullivan, unless you have something productive to contribute, I suggest you leave. The injunction stands. All business assets are frozen. If you attempt to move any property or funds, you'll be in contempt of court." Derek stared at me for a long moment. Then he smiled, cold, calculating, the smile of someone who still thought he had cards to play. "You think you've won," he said softly. "You have no idea what's coming." He turned and walked out, slamming the door hard enough to rattle the diplomas on Vincent's wall. Vincent let out a slow breath. "Well, that went better than expected." "Did it?" He didn't hire a lawyer, didn't threaten to countersue, just postured and left. Vincent sat down, frowning. "That worries me more than if he'd come in swinging." "Why?" "Because it means he's got a plan, and we don't know what it is yet." My phone buzzed. A text from Claire. "We need to talk. Just you and me. Tomorrow. Mom's grave." I showed it to Vincent. "It's a trap," he said immediately. "Probably," I agreed. "I'm going anyway." Sometimes, the hardest battles aren't fought in courtrooms. They're fought across kitchen tables and cemetery plots, with the people who are supposed to love you. If you've ever had to choose between family loyalty and doing what's right, you know how much that costs. Drop a comment if this hits home, and subscribe, because what happens next changes everything. I arrived at Woodland Cemetery 20 minutes early, parked under an oak tree with a clear view of the entrance. The morning was cold, the sky the color of old concrete. Maggie's grave was on the eastern slope, beneath a maple tree that blazed red every October. She'd picked the spot herself during one of her last good months. "I want somewhere with a view," she'd said, smiling through the pain. "Somewhere I can watch the sunrise." Claire was already there when I walked up, standing in front of the headstone with her arms wrapped around herself. She'd lost weight, Her coat hung loose, and there were shadows under her eyes I could see even from a distance. "Hi, sweetheart," I said softly. She turned. For just a second, her face crumpled real emotion, raw and unfiltered. Then she locked it down, went cold again. "Why are you doing this?" she asked. "Because Derek's been stealing from us, from you." "That's not true." "Claire, he's been helping, managing the business while you were gone, trying to salvage something from the wreck you left behind." I took a slow breath, fighting the urge to defend myself. "Have you looked at the bank records? The withdrawal authorizations?" He explained all that. "They're legitimate expenses." "With my forged signature?" She flinched. "He said you'd claim that you'd tried to discredit him because you can't stand that I chose someone over you. Is that what you think? That this is about jealousy? Isn't it?" Her voice rose, sharp and wounded. "You never liked Derek, never gave him a chance. And now that I'm finally happy, finally building a life that doesn't revolve around grief and old furniture and Mom's ghost, you come back and try to destroy it. I'm trying to protect you." "I don't need protection. I need you to leave me alone." The words echoed across the cemetery, scattering birds from the trees. An older couple visiting a nearby grave glanced over, then quickly looked away. Claire's hands were shaking. I wanted to reach for her, to pull her into a hug like I had when she was small and the world felt too big. But the distance between us wasn't measured in feet. It was measured in years of silence and unspoken pain. "Your mother left you the business because she trusted you to protect it," I said quietly. "Not to sell it, not to let someone dismantle it for parts. She believed you'd honor what she built." "Mom's dead," Claire's voice cracked. "She doesn't get a vote anymore." "No, but I do. And I'm not signing away my half." "Then we'll go to court. Derek's lawyer says we can force a sale based on irreconcilable partnership differences." "Derek's lawyer is wrong. And when this goes to trial, every forged document, every fraudulent withdrawal, every piece of stolen inventory, it's all going to come out. Is that what you want? Your husband facing criminal charges?" Claire's face went pale. "You're lying." "I wish I was." I pulled out my phone, showed her the photos I'd taken at the warehouse, the forged contracts, the liquidation manifests, the inventory records showing hundreds of thousands of dollars in missing materials. She stared at the screen, her breathing shallow. "Where did you get these?" "Hannah Chen." "Hannah?" Claire looked up, confused. "She works for Derek. She worked for your mother, and she's been documenting everything Derek's been doing because she knew something was wrong." For a long moment, Claire said nothing, just stared at the evidence, her expression unreadable. Then she handed back my phone and shook her head. "I don't believe you. Derek wouldn't." "Claire." "No." She stepped back. "You're my father, and I love you, but I can't do this. I can't choose between you and my husband. I won't." She turned and walked away, back toward the parking lot where Derek's Audi was parked, engine running. I stood there alone, in front of Maggie's grave, and whispered, "I'm trying. I swear I'm trying." The maple tree rustled overhead, scattering red leaves across the headstone. Somewhere behind me, I heard a car door slam, then another engine starting. When I turned around, Claire was gone. Vincent called me that evening with news that made my stomach drop. "Derek filed a counter motion this afternoon. He's claiming you're mentally unfit to manage business affairs, that you've been exhibiting signs of dementia and paranoia, and that Claire should be granted sole decision-making authority as the primary active partner." I sat down slowly on the motel bed. Dementia. It's a standard play when someone's desperate. He's going to argue that your allegations are the product of cognitive decline, that you're confused about what you did or didn't authorize. He's got Claire ready to testify that you've been forgetful and erratic since Maggie died. I'm 57 years old. Early onset dementia is a thing. And if Claire backs his story, Vincent trailed off. "She will. You should have seen her today. She's convinced herself that Derek's the victim here. Or she knows the truth and can't face it." I thought about that, about how much easier it would be for Claire to believe I was the problem, that I was sick, confused, vindictive, anything except right. Because if I was right, it meant she'd been living with a criminal. It meant her judgment had failed. It meant the life she'd built was constructed on lies. What do we do? I asked. We need witnesses who can testify to your mental competence, medical records showing no cognitive decline, character witnesses who can speak to your reliability and judgment. I've been living alone in Phoenix for 11 years. I don't have. What about your clients? The contractors you've worked with? Anyone who can vouch for you professionally? I thought about the medical clinic renovation, the residential projects, the architectural firm that hired me for consulting work. I had references. I had people who could testify that I was sharp, reliable, competent. But would it be enough to counter my own daughter calling me mentally unfit? There's something else, Vincent said carefully. Derek's also filed a restraining order. Claims you assaulted him during the initial confrontation. He punched me. I know. But there were no witnesses, except Claire. And she's supporting his version. He's got photos of bruising on his hand, probably self-inflicted, and he's claiming you became violent when he asked you to leave. The audacity of it stunned me. So what? I can't go near the warehouse? Can't see my daughter? Can't go within 500 feet of either of them until the hearing, which is scheduled for next Monday. 1 week. 1 week to prove I was sane, credible, and entitled to protect what Maggie had left behind. Vincent, I said quietly, if we lose this, we're not losing. But if we do, if the judge believes Derek, if Claire testifies against me, and the restraining order becomes permanent, then we appeal. We keep fighting. For how long? How much is this going to cost? I've got savings. But, Tom, Vincent's voice was firm. Maggie was my friend, one of the best people I've ever known. I'm not letting her legacy get stolen by some con artist with good hair and a law degree. We're seeing this through, whatever it takes. I closed my eyes, feeling the weight of it, the impossibility of proving I was competent to people who wanted to believe I wasn't, the cruelty of being shut out of my daughter's life by court order, the loneliness of fighting this battle, mostly alone. Okay, I said finally. What's our next move? We build the case. I'll coordinate with Hannah to get her testimony ready. You start reaching out to professional contacts for character references. And Tom? Yeah? Stay away from Derek and Claire. I know it's hard, but we can't give him any ammunition. No contact. No confrontations. Nothing he can twist into evidence of instability. Understood. After we hung up, I sat in the silence of the motel room and thought about Maggie, about what she would do in my position. She'd fight, quietly, strategically, without mercy. So that's what I'd do too. 3 days before the hearing, Hannah called me at midnight. Someone's at the warehouse, she said, her voice tight with fear. I've got a security app that pings me when there's movement. 2 vehicles. I can see them on the camera. Call the police. I did. They said since the property's in dispute, they can't intervene unless there's active vandalism. I think they're destroying evidence, Tom. I think Derek's cleaning house before Monday. The restraining order echoed in my head 500 feet. No contact. No confrontation. If I went to the warehouse and Derek was there, I'd be in contempt. Could be arrested. Would tank our entire case. But if he destroyed the evidence, I'm on my way, I said. Tom, the restraining order. Send me the camera feed. I drove fast. Maybe too fast. My phone propped on the dashboard, showing Hannah's security footage. 2 vehicles in the warehouse lot, Derek's Audi and a white panel van. Figures moving in and out of the barn, carrying boxes, loading them into the van. I parked a quarter-mile away and approached on foot, staying in the shadows. The restraining order said 500 feet. I stopped at exactly 502 feet, counting steps, and pulled out my phone to record. Through the camera zoom, I could see Derek directing 2 men I didn't recognize. They were loading filing cabinets, boxes of documents, anything that might contain evidence. One of them dropped a box, and papers scattered across the gravel. Derek barked something I couldn't hear, and the man scrambled to gather them up. My phone buzzed. Vincent calling. Where are you? He asked immediately. watching Derek destroy evidence. Tell me you're not violating the restraining order. I'm not. I'm 500 feet away. But I'm recording everything. Vincent was quiet for a moment. Smart. Keep recording. I'm calling Judge Morrison's emergency line. If we can get someone out there in the next 30 minutes. A flash of movement caught my eye. Claire had emerged from the warehouse, carrying a small box. Even from this distance, I could see she was crying. She set the box down, said something to Derek. He grabbed her arm, not gently. She yanked away, her body language screaming distress. They argued, voices rising even though I couldn't make out words. Then Claire saw something in one of the boxes the men were loading. She reached for it, and Derek blocked her, pushed her back. She stumbled, and that's when something inside me snapped. I was moving before I realized I'd made the decision, crossing the invisible 500-foot line. My feet carrying me toward my daughter, even though I knew it was stupid, reckless, exactly what Derek wanted. Tom, no, Vincent's voice in my ear, distant now. I was 50 feet away when Derek saw me. His face transformed surprise, then calculation, then triumph. You're in violation, he shouted. Everyone saw it. He's breaking the restraining order. Claire turned, eyes wide. Dad, he pushed you, I said, still walking toward her. I saw him push you. He didn't, it wasn't. She looked between us, trapped. Derek pulled out his phone, started recording. Thomas Mercer, you are in direct violation of a court-ordered restraining order. I'm documenting this for... Document whatever you want. I stopped 10 feet away, close enough to see the boxes they were loading, close enough to see Maggie's handwriting on some of the files. But you're not destroying her legacy. Not tonight. Sirens in the distance, getting closer. Derek smiled. You just lost, old man. Judge is going to see you can't control yourself, can't follow simple orders, can't be trusted. He was right. And I'd do it again. The police cruiser pulled into the lot, lights blazing. Claire stood frozen between us, her face streaked with tears, watching her entire world fracture. The courtroom was smaller than I expected. Wood paneling, fluorescent lights, a handful of observers scattered across the benches. Judge Patricia Morrison presided, a woman in her early 60s with steel-gray hair and the kind of expression that suggested she'd heard every lie humans could invent. Derek sat at the plaintiff's table with his attorney, Marcus Webb, expensive suit, practiced smile, the kind of lawyer who bills by the minute and wins by attrition. Claire sat beside them, her hands folded tight in her lap, not looking at me. I sat with Vincent at the defense table, watching my daughter pretend I didn't exist. The hearing began with Derek's attorney presenting the restraining order violation, photos of me approaching the warehouse, testimony from one of the men Derek had hired, swearing I'd been aggressive, unstable. Derek himself took the stand, painting a picture of a grieving widower who'd snapped, who couldn't accept that his daughter had moved on. Mr. Mercer became fixated on conspiracy theories, Webb said smoothly, convinced himself that my client was engaged in fraud, that his daughter was being manipulated. Classic paranoia stemming from unresolved grief and possible cognitive decline. Vincent objected twice, sustained once, overruled once. Then Claire took the stand. She looked fragile under the courtroom lights, young, scared. Webb asked her gentle questions about my behavior over the past 11 years. The distance, the minimal contact, the sudden reappearance. Has your father exhibited signs of confusion or memory loss? Webb asked. Claire's hands twisted in her lap. Sometimes, he forgets conversations we've had, gets details wrong. Can you give an example? Last year, he called on my birthday, asked how the business was doing. I told him we were struggling, that we might need to sell. He said he understood, that he'd support whatever decision I made. She paused. 2 months later, he called again and asked the same questions, like we'd never talked about it. My chest tightened. I didn't remember that. But then again, I'd made dozens of calls to Claire over the years, most of them awkward, many of them while I was exhausted from work. Had I forgotten? Or was she rewriting history? And when he arrived at your home uninvited, Webb continued, how did he behave? He was angry. confrontational. Derek tried to talk to him calmly, but Dad became aggressive. "Did he strike your husband?" Claire hesitated, just for a heartbeat. It happened fast. They were arguing. And, "Did you see your father strike Derek Sullivan?" "Yes." The word barely a whisper. I watched her lie. Watched her choose the man who'd been stealing from us over the father who'd crossed state lines to protect her, and I understood, with terrible clarity, that I'd already lost. Not the case. Vincent would present our evidence. Hannah would testify. The forged documents would speak for themselves. We might win the legal battle. But I'd lost my daughter, maybe permanently. Vincent's cross-examination was gentle, but firm. He asked Claire about the financial records. She claimed ignorance. About the missing inventory, she said Derek had explained it. About Hannah's documentation, she suggested Hannah was mistaken, or possibly in league with me. Every answer drove the wedge deeper. Then Vincent called Hannah to the stand. She was nervous but credible, walking Judge Morrison through the inventory records, the missing materials, the pattern of systematic theft. She produced photographs, receipts, emails, showing Derek explicitly instructing her to delete certain records. "Why didn't you come forward sooner?" the judge asked. "Because I was scared," Hannah said honestly. "Derek Sullivan is well connected in this town. I'm a freelance carpenter barely making rent. I thought if I spoke up, I'd lose everything." She glanced at me. But then Mr. Mercer came back, and I realized some things are worth losing everything for. Vincent presented the forged signatures next. Had a handwriting expert testify that the signatures on the withdrawal authorizations didn't match my verified signature samples. Showed the judge the contract I'd found at the warehouse, the one authorizing Derek to liquidate assets. Signed with my forged name. Derek's attorney tried to discredit it, claimed I could have forged it myself to frame his client. But Judge Morrison wasn't buying it. "Mr. Webb," she said dryly, "are you seriously suggesting that Mr. Mercer flew from Arizona, broke into a warehouse, created fraudulent documents, hid them in filing cabinets, and then discovered them, all as part of an elaborate scheme to, what? Stop his daughter from selling a business he claims to want to preserve? Your Honor, grief can make people. Save it." Judge Morrison turned to Derek. "Mr. Sullivan, stand up." Derek stood, his confidence finally wavering. "I'm granting a temporary continuation of the asset freeze, pending a full criminal investigation into allegations of fraud and embezzlement. If the county prosecutor finds sufficient evidence to file charges, this court will revisit the question of business ownership." She looked at Claire. "Miss Mercer Sullivan, I strongly suggest you hire independent legal counsel. The attorney currently representing your interests also represents your husband, which presents a significant conflict." Claire's face went pale. "As for the restraining order," Judge Morrison continued, "I'm dissolving it. Mr. Mercer's violation was in response to witnessing what appeared to be domestic distress and potential evidence tampering. While I don't condone breaking court orders, I understand the context." Derek's attorney started to object, but the judge held up her hand. "We're done here. Next case." Sometimes winning in court doesn't feel like winning at all. Sometimes you get justice but lose what you were fighting for in the first place. If you've ever had to choose between being right and being loved, you know that hollow feeling. Share your story below. And if you've made it this far, hit subscribe, because the hardest part is still coming. The criminal investigation took 6 weeks. In that time, I moved back to Ohio permanently, rented a small apartment near the salvage warehouse, and started the slow work of cataloging what was left. Hannah helped. So did Vincent, in between filing motions and coordinating with the prosecutor's office. We worked mostly in silence, sorting through the remnants of Maggie's life work, the pieces Derek hadn't managed to sell or destroy. It wasn't much, maybe 20% of the original inventory, but it was something. The county prosecutor, a sharp woman named Andrea Liu, filed charges in early January. 3 counts of forgery, 2 counts of embezzlement, 1 count of fraud. Derek was arrested on a Tuesday morning 11 years, almost to the day after Maggie died. The irony wasn't lost on me. Claire didn't call. didn't visit, didn't respond to the letter I sent explaining that I'd never wanted it to come to this, that I'd only wanted to protect what her mother had built. Vincent told me she'd filed for divorce, that she'd moved back into the house on Maple Ridge Drive, the one Derek had claimed wasn't mine anymore, that she'd started seeing a therapist. I hoped it was helping. The trial happened in March. I didn't attend, Vincent said. It would be better if I stayed away. Let the evidence speak for itself. Derek pled guilty to avoid a longer sentence. Got 4 years in state prison, restitution orders totaling $340,000, and a permanent ban from holding fiduciary positions. When it was over, Vincent called me from the courthouse steps. "It's done," he said simply. "How's Claire?" She wasn't there. I closed my eyes, leaning against the warehouse wall. "Okay. Tom, give her time. She's processing a lot." "I know. It's fine." It wasn't fine. But what else was there to say? I spent the next 3 months rebuilding the business. Not the way it was, that was impossible, but something new. Something that honored Maggie's vision while acknowledging that the world had changed. I hired Hannah full-time as operations manager, brought in 2 young apprentices from the local trade school, set up an online storefront that showcased the inventory with professional photos and detailed provenance, started reaching out to architects and designers, rebuilding the relationships Maggie had spent decades cultivating. Slowly, the business started breathing again. One afternoon in May, I was refinishing a set of antique pocket doors when I heard footsteps behind me. I turned, expecting Hannah. It was Claire. She stood in the warehouse doorway, backlit by spring sunshine, looking thin and tired and heartbreakingly like her mother. We stared at each other for a long moment, the air thick with everything unsaid. "Hi, Dad," she said finally. "Hi, sweetheart. Can we talk?" I set down my sanding block, wiped my hands on my jeans. Of course. We walked outside, sat on the bench Maggie had placed under the dogwood tree, the one Derek had cut down, but which I'd replaced with a sapling the week I moved back. Claire studied the young tree, her expression unreadable. "You replanted it. Your mom loved dogwoods." "I know." Her voice cracked slightly. "I helped her pick the original one. I was 7. We drove to 3 different nurseries before she found one with the right shape." We sat in silence for a while, watching clouds drift across the pale sky. "I'm sorry," Claire said finally, "for not believing you, for choosing Derek, for—" her voice broke, "for everything. You don't have to." "Yes, I do." She turned to face me, tears streaming down her face. "I was so angry after Mom died. Angry at the universe, at cancer, at God, but mostly at you. Because you were still here, and she wasn't. And it felt easier to be mad at you than to accept that she was gone." Claire. "And then Derek came along, and he was so certain about everything. He had plans, answers, solutions. He made me feel like life could still make sense, even though nothing made sense anymore. So when you came back and said he was lying, I couldn't hear it. Because if he was lying, it meant I'd been fooled. It meant my judgment was broken. It meant I was alone again. I reached for her hand. She let me take it. "You're not alone," I said quietly. "You never were." She sobbed then, the kind of deep, wrenching sobs that come from years of held-back grief. I pulled her close, let her cry against my shoulder the way she used to when she was small and the world felt too big. "I don't know how to fix this," she whispered. "We don't have to fix it all at once. We just take it one day at a time." She pulled back, wiped her eyes. "Can I help? With the business? I don't know much, but I'd like that." She nodded, tried to smile. "Mom would have wanted us to do this together." "Yeah," I said. "She would have." 6 months later, Claire and I were sorting through the last boxes of Maggie's personal effects, the ones that had been in storage since she died, the ones neither of us had been ready to face. We'd been working together at the salvage business since May, slowly rebuilding our relationship along with the inventory. It wasn't easy. Some days we barely spoke. Other days we worked side by side in comfortable silence, the kind that comes from shared purpose. She'd told me about the divorce, about the therapy, about the long process of untangling her life from Derek's. I'd told her about Arizona, about the loneliness, about the guilt that had followed me across state lines. We were learning each other again, father and daughter, partners. The boxes had been stored in a climate-controlled unit Vincent had arranged for, just until you're ready, he'd said. Now, apparently, we were ready. Most of it was routine. Photo albums, books, Maggie's collection of vintage hand tools. But at the bottom of the last box, wrapped in a waterproof bag, was a leather journal I'd never seen before. Claire pulled it out carefully, ran her fingers over the embossed cover. Mom's handwriting. We opened it together. The first page was dated 3 months before Maggie died. To whoever finds this, probably Tom, knowing his pack rat tendencies. If you're reading this, I'm gone. And if I know my family, you're probably fighting. Tom's probably in denial about how bad things have gotten. Claire's probably trying to handle everything herself and resenting that she has to. And you're both probably convinced the other one doesn't understand. You're both wrong. And you're both right. I know you wanted to stay and fight, to preserve everything we built, to honor my memory by keeping the business exactly as it was. But sweetheart, businesses aren't monuments. They're living things. They grow, change, sometimes die. That's okay. What matters isn't the building or the inventory, it's the principles behind them. Craftsmanship, integrity, seeing value in what others discard. If those survive, I survive. Claire, I know you wanted to move on, to build something new that doesn't remind you of hospitals and hospice, and losing me. That's okay too. Grief makes us want to burn everything down and start over. But running from pain just means it catches you somewhere else. Eventually, you'll have to stop and face it. If you two are reading this together, it means something went wrong. It means you're fighting, or you've grown apart, or someone tried to come between you. But here's what I need you to understand. You're all each other has. Tom, Claire is your legacy, just as much as this business. Claire, your father is the strongest, most stubborn, most loyal man I've ever known. You both inherited parts of me, but you also inherited parts of each other. Don't lose that. And if some smooth-talking jackass tries to convince you the business is worth more dead than alive, remember this. Your grandfather built the foundation of our lives with his hands. Your father and I built the walls. Claire, you're the roof. You're what protects everything underneath. Don't let anyone convince you to tear down what 3 generations built. Also, Tom, there's a safe deposit box at First National Bank, box 447. The key is taped to the back of this journal. Inside, you'll find updated ownership documents that clarify the business structure. I had Vincent help me set it up before I got too sick to think straight. It should prevent any complications. I love you both, more than words can say, more than time allowed. Take care of each other. Maggie. Claire was crying again, but quietly now. I wiped my own eyes, pulled her close. She knew. Claire whispered. She knew Derek would try something. She knew people, knew how grief makes us vulnerable. I turned the journal over, found the key taped to the back cover, exactly where Maggie said it would be. Want to take a drive to the bank? Claire nodded. The safe deposit box contained exactly what Maggie promised: updated articles of incorporation, partnership agreements, a trust structure that protected the business from being dissolved or sold without unanimous consent from all parties. It also contained a letter to Claire, sealed in an envelope marked, "When you're ready." Claire held it for a long moment, then slipped it into her pocket. Not yet. Okay. We drove back to the warehouse in comfortable silence. When we pulled into the lot, Hannah was standing outside with a client, a young architect, who'd driven up from Columbus to look at some reclaimed heart pine. Claire glanced at me. You handle this one. I'm going to work on inventory. You sure? Yeah. She paused, hand on the door handle. Dad? Yeah? Thanks for not giving up on me. Never crossed my mind, sweetheart. She smiled, the first real smile I'd seen from her in years, and headed into the warehouse. I watched her go, then turned to greet the client. The dogwood sapling swayed in the breeze, its leaves bright green against the afternoon sky. Not fully grown yet, but getting there. Just like us. Family isn't about being perfect. It's about showing up, even when it's hard, even when you're scared, even when the people you love can't see what you're trying to protect. If this story touched you, if you've fought to save something that mattered, or if you've had to rebuild trust after betrayal, I want to hear about it. Drop your story in the comments. Every single one matters. And if you made it all the way to the end, thank you. Hit that subscribe button and stick around for more stories about quiet vengeance, hard-won justice, and the truth that families are built, not born. There's more coming, much more.